So, like many of these dapim in Bava Batra, it's unclear what to do. Should we go ahead? Should we not? But it's daf yomi, so you live and breathe with the daf. So today's daf on Sunday morning is daf Lamed Gimel 33 in Masechet Bava Batra. We're in the third parak, Cheskat Batim. And so we got yesterday to the bottom of Lamed Bet Amabet, 4 lines from the bottom. We have a new story. What's the new story? So 4 lines from the bottom, first word on the line. Rava Bar Sharsham. There was a Amor, I guess, whose name was Rava Bar Sharsham, and Nafik Aleh Kala de Ka'achal Ardiyatmi. He was in a field. He had ownership over a field, and rumors started going around that saying that he was eating the field of Yitomim. That in fact this field belonged to orphans, and he was making money, profiting off their field. So people start saying things. So Amar le Abaya, so Abaya came to this Rava Bar Sharsham, and he said, Emily easy is like a term for endearment, like my buddy. Tell me, my colleague, Gufa de Uvda Hechahava. What exactly is going on here? Like, who owns this field? Good morning, Robert. Let me say that one more time. So we're in the bottom of Lamed Bet Amud Bet, 4 lines from the bottom. A fascinating story. I hope we have some lawyers here. Rava Bar Sharsham is in possession of this field. He's farming it. He's getting all kinds of great produce out of it. And the rumors start spreading that this field belongs to orphans. There's a man, let's call him Ruvain, who died last year, and his estate really owns this field. So Abaya came to Rava Bar Sharsham and he said, tell me, Amingly easy, Gufa Dov Dechiavi, what's going on? Who owns this land? How did you get to it? Do you really own it? What's the story? Amalei. So Rava Bar Sharsham said, the truth is that this is what happened. Ara b'mashkunta havi nakita me'avun diyatmi. The land was a mashkon. I don't own this land at all. But I lent the father, who's dead now, I lent him $1 million. And we made a deal. Remember, we had this in Bava Metzia a lot, that there's something called mashkanta desura. Mashkanta desura is where you borrow money, and as guarantor for the money, you give your land. But the contract terms are that the lender gets to keep the land for X number of years, and each year subtracts from the loan. At the end of the time of the mashkanta, the field goes back to the borrower, and the loan is paid off. Right? We had a whole discussion how that's not interest, because even though you might even making back more than the loan, you're basically structuring it as a long-term lease, right? So I said, Rava Bar Sharsham,
So he owns it then at the end, right? If I remember that from Bava Metzia.
there's different ones. Remember, there were some mashkantas that you did owe. This one, you go back free. It pays off the whole loan. A mashkanta desura is where basically you give the field to the lender for, say, 10 years. And at the end of 10 years, the field goes back to the borrower and the loan is done. You don't owe the loan. So basically, it's not a loan. It's essentially a long-term rental that we structured as a loan. So said Rava Bar Sharsham. So I had this land from Ruvain as a mashkanta, having Nikita me'avun diyatmi, from the father of the Yatomim. But the truth is, and the 10 years is up. So the truth is I should give them back the field, right? It's not my field. But they, in addition to the loan that the field was a guarantor for, I also lent their father another $100,000. And I have a star. I have proof of that, right? But Havili Zuzi Achrini Gabe, top line of Daf Lamed Gimel. I have other money that I lent him and he's died, right? And so I finished eating the years of the mashkon. So that loan, the first loan, is wiped out. But, I said to myself, said Rava Bar Sharsham, Amina, right? I said to myself, or I said to you, the Rabbiya, that if I go to the Yitomim now and I say, look, thanks a lot for the land. This is your father's land. I used it for 10 years. I'm done with it. And I also say to the Yorshim, by the way, your father also owed me another $100,000. And I say to them, Itli Zuzi Achrini Gabi Avuchan, that I have other money that your father borrowed from me, right? The problem is I won't be able to collect that. Because Amur Rabbanan, the Rabbanan have said, if you recall, that although usually if you have a star, you go to someone and say, you owe me $100,000, and you prove the star is a good star, he has to pay you back. But the Rabbanan said, Habali para min yitomim, fourth line from the top, A person who comes to collect from property of Yitomim, lo yipara ela b'shvua. You can only collect from Yitomim with a shvua. So the only way that I would be able to collect this extra $100,000 would be to make a shvuah that the father didn't pay me before he died, even though I'm holding a shtar, right? We have, well, and we're going to discuss this much more, of course, but that's the halacha, is that you have to swear when you collect from Yitomim. We're going to see in a second, it's much more than that. And Tosfos points this out. It's that you also can't do that until they become adults, right? You can't collect from Yitomim, even if you swear, until they're 13, right? So you're going to have to maybe wait a few years. And even once they're adults, you're going to have to swear, right? And Rava bar Sharshim did not want to make a shvua. So what I said to myself, fifth line, is Ela ach v'shei l'shtar mashkanta. I will hide the shtar mashkanta. I will hide the document that says that I'm living on this land because I am a lender and it's a guarantee for me. And I will say nothing, and I'm living on the land. I'll continue living on the land. Va'ochla shir zuzi, and I'll sit there for long enough to make back the money he owes me, the $100,000, say a year or 2 years, and then I'll give it back to them. And I should be believed, he said to Abaya, because migo I could have just said, look, there's no document. No one knows about the document. I could have said, if I wanted to lie, I could have said, I bought it from your father. And you would say to me, where's your document that you bought it from my father? I would say, I lost the document, but I've lived here for 5 years. Everybody knows I've lived here for 5 years, right? And that's a chazaka, right? So if I could have said, I would have been believed. Now that I'm telling you the truth, that I never bought the field, right? But he owes me $100,000, so let me collect. Here, you should believe me. So this was Rava bar Sharshim's plot, that he basically said, I don't own the field. The father who gave me the field to use as my guarantee on the loan I gave him is dead, and that loan is up. But they really owe me more money. And the easiest thing for me is just to stay on the field, collect, fruit from the field for whatever amount he owes me. At the end of the term, I'll go back to the Yitomim and I'll say to them, okay, here's your father's field back. I stayed for 2 extra years because your father owed me money, and here he doesn't owe me the money anymore. And I could avoid a shvua. So Rava bar
But don't they have that contract that was created? You told me, don't they have it from the father? Isn't there something in writing? If it was written, aren't there 2 copies?
No, I guess not. So that I don't know the answer to that. Either they didn't have one. So what Rava bar Sharshim, right? This relies on him hiding the contract, right? Because if he doesn't hide the contract, he doesn't say, which sounds like a little bit of subterfuge, right? He'll say, I lost it. It doesn't exist. Otherwise, because if you bring a contract that says basically you're living, Tosfos points this out here as well. Then remember, if you're a worker, for example, someone gives you stuff, says, come work on my field, and then you work on the field for 10 years and you come and say, I bought it, and I don't have a contract, right? And I have a chazaka, we don't believe you. Because since we know you were a worker on the field, we know that no one will kick you off the field, right? So it basically ruins your chazaka. The whole point of a chazaka is that someone wouldn't let you live on their field if you didn't really buy it. But here, there's another reason they let you live on the field, because they owed you money and you were paying it off.
Wait, say it again. With the worker, he's allowed to, he lives on the field, but no,
right. So I'm saying with the worker, there's no chazaka, for example, we said with the worker, because since he went to the field with permission, it no longer is effective for him to say, you would have kicked me out. I wouldn't have kicked you out. So therefore, there's no chazaka in that case. Here too, this guy, if we knew that he went to the field because of the mashkanta, then we wouldn't allow him to have a chazaka. But he says, I will hide that shtar. No one knows it exists. And since I guess there's not another copy, which is a flaw here, right? So no one knows it exists. So I had a migo. I could have lied. Now I didn't lie, right? But you should trust me and not make me make a shvua and allow me to stay on the field for 2 more years or whatever time to pay back the loan that the father owes me. So that is what he said.
Well, he didn't lie to whom? He didn't lie to Abai.
Right.
But he's essentially lying to the children, the orphans. Maybe not in so many words, but he's essentially lying to them. Correct.
It is true. Amarle. So Abaya said to him, you're a little too smart for yourself, because you could never make a migu here. You could never have said to him, to your orphans, a lie that I bought it and I just lost the shtar that your father gave me and I have a chazaka. Why? Right? The whole reason we have a story here is because the neighborhood is all saying this guy is inappropriately living in land that belongs to these orphans. So clearly, you don't have a chazaka. The whole point of chazaka is that you don't have to keep the shtar around because if you're living there, everyone assumes it's yours. But here, when everyone is saying this is the land that belongs to the orphans of Joe, of Ruvain, you would have to keep your shtar. So the Rashbam explains it. You'd have to keep your shtar. If you're foolish enough to lose that shtar, that's considered to be very foolish, and you don't get the field, right? Remember, the whole point of chazaka is that if a person comes and says, "This is my field," we usually say to that person, "Well, prove it," right? You can't claim you own a field without any kind of documentation. You have to have something. And the whole point of chazaka is that people say, look, after a long time, when things are established, right, it's not crazy that you lost your documents or you misplaced them, or you don't know where every single thing is. But in this case, because people are still referring to this field as the Yatomim's field, which turns out to be accurate, but because that's the common knowledge, you would be expected to keep your shtar around. And the fact that you don't have a shtar means you don't have a chazaka, right? Or you don't have proof that it's yours. And so it says Abaya, in this case, you're saying I have a chazaka would not be enough, because we would say you should have had a shtar, because people are saying it belongs to Yatomim. Ella, says Abaya, Zil ahadrena nihilayo, go and give back the field to Yatomim right now. And when they get older, mechigad liyatmi, when they become older, and then you can go and ishto edina badayo, and you could do a din with them, which would involve you making a shvua. And like everybody else, you have the same rules as everybody else, Rava bar Sharshum. So it turns out you were not too smart. Again, these are all extensions of the cases we've had of migo and chazaka and assumptions. Really fascinating cases.
The so next his migo was that he lost it.
His migo is that he could have said that he lost. Could have said he was the owner. Right? No. He could have. The migo was, which we don't in fact, is that he could have said, "Look, I've been living here for 10 years. Everybody knows I've been here for 10 years." I could have said, I bought it from their father before he died. I don't have a shtar that the father sold it to me, but I have a chazaka. And a chazaka can replace a shtar, right? So
but if you didn't earlier, you said that he could have said he lost it, but that's not what he said. He never said he lost it.
That's what migo is. Right. You don't make the claim. You could have made the claim.
Right, but he didn't say his migo was not that he lost it. Was his migo was that he had a chazaka, right?
Right. So 1 second. Remember, usually if you say I owe something, we say to you, prove you owe it. Right. And in almost all cases, if you can't prove you owe something, it's your word means nothing.
Right.
The exception, the whole point of this parak, is that in some cases, especially property, that there's an exception. That if a person says, I don't have a shtar, I lost the shtar, we don't say, well, tough luck, get out of the field. We say, if you've been there for a certain amount of time and people have known you've been there and they didn't make they didn't make a claim saying you're inappropriate, then it's commonly assumed that it's your field. So that's what Rava bar Sharsham claimed. He said, I could have said, I've been here, nobody stopped me from being here, which is a fact. Everyone will agree to that. It's been there for 10 years. I am here because I bought it and I lost my shtar. And so therefore we would have trusted him. We would have given him the field. He would have owned 100%. Now he's coming and saying, well, I really don't own it, but these kids owe me $100,000. Let me collect it from the field. So that's the migo. But Abaya said to him, your chazaka would not have been a good chazaka, because since people still know that this is a field of the Yorshim, clearly that's essentially a macha. That's essentially people saying it's not yours. You're owning it because your father owed you money, but it's not yours, and therefore you don't have a chazaka. You need a shtar. You don't have a shtar because you never bought it, and therefore you have no migo. Give the field back to the Yatomim, and you do have a shtar that says that their father owes you $100,000, but that's something you're going to deal with when they get older, and you're going to have to make a shvua associated with that shtar.
I'm just thinking there could have been another migo other than saying that he bought it. I'm just trying to figure out, there may have been, to say that's a bit of a stretch to say, if he knows and everyone knows that he loaned the money to create a migo, that I could have said I bought it. I'm thinking there may have been even a better migo than that. I'm trying to, but I don't know.
You'll come up with it. Continues Gemara with the two dots around halfway down. Kreva de Ravidi bar Avin. Now, a relative of Ravidi bar Avin, it's a little debatable whether the word relative should be here, but let's keep it. A relative of Ravidi bar Avin, Shachiv, he died. Vishavak Diklan, he left this beautiful deco, this beautiful palm tree, maybe it's a whole row of palm trees. He left this beautiful thing, but he didn't leave a will. Okay, so we don't know who this palm tree goes to. And Rav Idi bar Avin Amar Anakriv Nitzvei. Idi bar Avin raised his hand, he came to court, he said, I am the closest relative. But course, somebody else came and said, Ahu Gavra Amar, another person came and showed up and said, I'm the closest relative. And we'll see, there was no way, whatever it was, I don't exactly know why, they couldn't quite prove who was the closer relative. Okay, they didn't have enough knowledge or documentation. So it was basically his word, one word against the other. So as we're going to see later, tomorrow actually, if Nachman Paskin's in such a situation where two people basically have equal claims, that the way we adjudicate that is called the alim gavar. Whoever is stronger wins. And that's a halachic principle, that basically the one who wants it more essentially is the one who gets it. When they have entirely equal claims, one person says it's my father's, one person says it's my father's, there's no way to prove that. We basically extricate ourselves and we say, you guys fight it out. So what happened here was,
What's that called? Alon Gavar? What?
Kol de alim gavar. Whoever is alim means alim is alimut, is power, force.
Right.
Whoever is more powerful, gavar wins. We're going to see it more tomorrow in these cases, but this is what happened here. So the other guy, unnamed guy, not Ravidi Bar Avin, was more powerful, and he kicked Ravidi Bar Avin out, and he lived in the house, and everything was going good. But Lesof, after a period of time, let's say 2 years, the other guy felt guilty maybe, and Odile the iu carved tfe. Tosas takes out the words iu carved tfe, but we'll read them for now. He admitted to him that in fact Rav Idi Bar Avin was the closer relative. He said, "I'm sorry, I had a second thought about this. I've been dealing inappropriately. Really, it's your field. It's your father's field, and you get it." So then Ukmer Rav Chisda biyadi. So Rav Chisda said, "Okay, so the field goes to Rav Idi Bar Avin because now the plaintiff, basically the other claimant, admitted that it's not his." Tosis doesn't like the part of that he admitted that he was more closer. It just says L'sof Odile, that at the end, the guy was like, I don't want to fight with Ravidi Bar Avin. Everyone's giving me a hard time, that I'm a rough guy. Here, Ravidi, you just take it. I don't care anymore, right? Not that I think you're right, that I just give in to you. So Amar Le, so Ravidi Bar Avin was not satisfied with getting his field. He said, look, thank you for giving me the field now, but you've been stealing it from me for the last 2 years. So Lahadr Li Peri Da'achal Mehu Yumad Hashta. I want you to pay me back all the benefit you got from the field. You've been eating all the food from this deca, from this beautiful palm tree, $10,000 a year worth of fruit. I want you to pay me back for everything you ate from the time you took my field until now. So Amar, Abaya, is it we have Amar Abaya? No, Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said to Ravidi Bar Avin, wow, you seem like a fool. Zeu she'omer malav adam gadolu. They say about you that you're a great man. This is not a smart thing to say. Aman kasamachmar. I don't get it. What are you relying on to get your field back? You're relying on this guy, right? Ahai, right? You're relying on this guy. You're saying we take him at his word. But remember, Hakamar Namakarv Natzvei. He said, I am closer. Meaning, your whole proof that you get the field is it's your word against his. So you have to now trust his word that he's giving it to you. But this is Tosas Pshat. He initially said he was closer. So he claims that he really gets it. Now, after 2 years, he wants to stop fighting with you. He wants good blood. He's willing to walk away from the claim. But he still claims that it was his because he initially said it was his. So therefore, you don't get the fruit up till now. You just get your field back. That's Tosas Pshat. Rashbam does have the girsa that we have in our Gemara, where after 2 years, the guy admitted that he was not the closest relative. So then the question is, why wouldn't he have to pay back the payroll? The Rashbam is not so clear what he means exactly, but what the Rashbam, to me at least, sounds like is that basically this guy is essentially, as the Rashbam puts it, is that he's giving you a gift, right? Meaning what? There's no shtar, there's no chazaka, there's no facts that prove what's happening here. And so because of that, when he comes to you at the end of 2 years and says, okay, it's yours, you can have it, essentially he's gifting it to you. It's not that the facts are established. We have nothing new to look at the facts. But now he basically has agreed that he'll give it to you, but that only goes from now and forward. It doesn't go retroactively because initially his claim was that he was closer. And so therefore, based on the initial claim, he got to legitimately keep the food for the first couple of years because the halacha of kol da'alim gavar. And it's only now that you get it. That was what Rav Chisda said.
You're saying where the Rashbam says, who can noten lecha et ha'ilan midato.
Right. So he's basically gifting it to him, but he's not necessarily establishing the facts retroactively.
But you're reading the word in matana there. He doesn't really say matana. He says he's giving it to him. He doesn't use the word matana.
The next words are
explicit sometimes when the Gemara talks about matanai. It doesn't
Look at
say
the next
that.
words of the Rashbam. Af al pi shelo zechita bo min hadin. It's not like halachic. It's not basically based on the facts. It's essentially a gift. So that's the Rashbam. That's what Rav Chisda said. But says the Gemara, Abaya and Rava lo sfir lo had Rav Chisda. But Abaya and Rava said that's ridiculous. You're splitting hairs. They did not turn the page to Lamagimel Mebet. They did not agree with Rav Chisda, and they said, Kivan to Odi. Once the guy admits that it's not his field, we take that as fact. And we go back and we say it was never his field, and he, in fact, has to pay back whatever fruit he ate from the field from the beginning time. Because it turns out Ravidi Ravin said it was his, the other guy said it was his, turns out the other guy was wrong, he denied it, he lied, and he does not have ownership. Ravidi Ravin's the owner, and he gets the fruits back. The Rashbam says, Kain halacha. That's how we paskin. Now, top line of Lam Gimel Mebet. Two more cases, I think, for today. Zeh omer shel avotai, v'zeh omer shel avotai. Very tricky, okay? You have a field, a person dies, and it's happened, I'm sure, all the time. Probably today it happens all the time too, but we have much better records, right? But back in those days when the records were scant, there's an abandoned field. Two people show up in town one day. One says it was my father's field. One says it was my father's fields. They're not the same father, right? They're not related. So it's all their word. Now, hi aiti sadi davatuhu. So the first guy, let's call him Ruvain, he brings proof. He brings witnesses who say, we know that this field belonged to his father. So he basically has proof, and essentially what they say, according to the Rashbam, is that he never sold it, that we know that he died in possession of this field, okay? So we know that this field belonged to the father of the first one. The second guy brings proof that he's been living on the field for the last 3 years. So he's got proof that he was there. And so he essentially, no one complained about it. No one kicked him off. So that is proof that he bought the field, presumably, right? So Amar Rav Chisda, so says Rav Chisda, well, that is pretty powerful because Malo l'shaker. The guy who has the chazakah, he has a migo. Why would he lie? If he wanted to, he could have said, Minach Zavinta, sure, it belonged to your father, but I bought it from your father, the Achalte Shnei Chazakah. And I've been living here for many years. I don't have a star that I bought from your father. I lost the star. I never had a star, but you don't need a star if you have a chazakah. So I could have said, sure, what you said is true, that it belonged to your father, but I bought it from your father, and I lived there a chazakah. And so therefore, since I could have said that, the fact that what did I say? I said it was my father's, right? So, I mean, my father bought it from your father, I guess. But because I claimed it was my father's, I'm believed. Because I have amigo that I could have said, I bought it from you and had a chazakah. So that's Rav Chisda. And again, Abaya v'Rava lo sfir lahu had Rav Chisda. Abaya Rava said it's not true. You don't rely on this principle of Rav Chisda, of amigo, because mali the shaker b'makom edim lo amina. You don't say mali the shaker when it goes against witnesses. The issue here is that the witnesses claim that it belonged to the father of the first guy. You're coming and saying, I had amigo. I could have said, I bought it from the first guy, and I lived in there, or my father bought it from the first guy. No, I bought it, sorry. I bought it from the first guy, and I lived there years of a chazakah. But the witnesses contradict that, because the witnesses claim, this is why the Rashbam had the case this way, the witnesses claim that the Edim, the witnesses claim that the first guy's father owned it and never sold it, that he owned it until the day he died. And so since they basically have an explicit claim that goes against your migo does not have effect. Now, had you had a star, right, your star would have been affected over the Edim. But the point here is that because you don't have a star and you're relying basically on a chazakah and you're relying on amigo, you don't say amigo when it contradicts what the Edim said. And therefore, you don't have amigo and you basically are out of luck. Hahu,
We had a case very similar to this about 2-3 days ago, where the person, when he says, the one who has the chazakah, he says, yeah, avotai, but he really means that it was mine. It was as if it was my father.
Right.
That was sold to my father by your father. And it was so I'm using the words avotai, but it's really not, but it's as if it's my father's.
Correct. That is true. That's 2 days ago when we were trying to redefine what a person said, right? What did they really mean? But here it's a little different because here we're saying one has a chazakah and one has a real Yerusha. That was the migo, at least. Let's do the next case. We are 7 lines from the top. A person goes over to somebody else who's living in a field and he says, why are you here? This is my field, my ba'it ba'ayara, right? This is how we start all these cases. Reuven comes over to Shimon. Shimon's living happily on his homestead. And Reuven says, what are you doing here? This is my house, right? My land, my ba'it ba'ayara. What are you doing in my land? Amarle, so Shimon says to Reuven, why are you coming? You're crazy. Minach zavni. I bought it from you. I don't have a shtar, but achalti shnei chazaka. But I've lived here for more than 3 years, and so I don't need to have my shtar anymore. I bought it from you. I admit, Reuven, that this used to be your field, but I bought you. You sold it to me before you went away for 10 years, and I've been living here, and I have years of chazaka, right? So Reuven says to Shimon, well, prove it. You don't have a shtar. Prove to me that you have years of chazakah. So Azo Aiti Sadi, the Achle Tarti Shnei. He went and found witnesses who reported that he's been there for 2 years. He couldn't find a witness for the third year. So all Shimon in this case can prove is that he's living on the land and he's been there for at least 2 years, right? But that's not a chazakah, 2 years. So Amar Rav Nachman said, Rav Nachman, well, if you can't prove it, meaning everyone agrees it used to belong to Reuven. Reuven claims it still belongs to him. Shimon says, I bought it from you, but I lost my shtar, which is very suspicious, right? And so we say, if you've lived there for 3 years, then you don't need to have the shtar. And Shimon says, I lived there for 3 years, but he can't prove that. He can only prove he's lived there for 2 years. So since Shimon can't prove he's been there for 3 years, he has no chazaka, he has no shtar, he gets kicked off the land. So says Rav Nachman, Hadra Ara, the land goes back to Reuven. But not only does the land go back to Reuven, but now that Shimon has admitted that he's been living there and eating the fruit from the field, he has to pay for the amount that he ate, 100 peri. He's got to pay for the food that he ate over the last 2 years because you have witnesses that he's been there. He can't deny that. And he has no proof that he bought it. So he basically went to your field, we're assuming, as a squatter and took 2 years of fruit. So he's got to pay that back. So you lose in every regard. Amar Rav Zvid, says Rav Zvid, wait a second, Rav Nachman. Why would he have to pay back the peri? Look, if let's say a person shows up, this is the case. Reuven shows up one day and Shimon is living on his field and planting and harvesting. And Reuven says to Shimon, Shimon, what are you doing on my field? And Shimon says, well, 10 years ago or 3 years ago, you hired me to be a sharecropper for you. And you told me that I could work your field and that I can keep half of the fruit, let's say. So Shimon has no proof. But if he says that, he would be trusted. And you wouldn't say to Shimon, pay back all the food you've kept in the last 3 years. Right? So it says Rav Zvid, Im ta'an va'amar leperot yeradati. If when Reuven showed up, Shimon had said, I'm living in your field, Reuven. I never bought it from you. But I went down to the field to work and keep the fruit. Milo mehemin, right? Ne'eman, sorry. Where am I? Perot yeradati ne'eman. He would be believed, right? Because lavmi amar of Yehuda. Right. So actually, I'm sorry. I said it a little correctly. Rav Zvid is not responding to Rav Nachman. Rav Zvid is just making a comment. Said Rav Zvid, if the guy said, Amar, the Perot Yeradati. Reuven shows up. Shimon is living on his field and harvesting his tomatoes. And Reuven says to Shimon, what are you doing here? Pay me back for all the stuff you kept for the last 2 years. And Shimon says, no. You hired me to be a worker for you, to work your field and keep the sharecropping percentage, half the fake perot or whatever it is. Then Ne'eman. Then Shimon would be believed. Because Lavmi Amar of Yehuda, because Rav Yehuda said something very interesting. Said Rav Yehuda, Haman denakit magla v'tovila. If a man's walking down the road with a magla is some kind of cutting implement, like a sword, like a scythe or a sickle, I don't know the difference, and a tovila, which Rashbam says means a rope. So he says that the one shot he has is that it's a rope that you would use like a pulley system to lift yourself up to the tree to harvest, like to lift yourself up on a like a bucket, basically. The other shot he has is that, in fact, it's the rope of the basket that you put the fruit into. So it's the woven basket. But either way, a guy's walking down the street with all the tools you need to harvest a date tree. Okay.
And what is that? I've seen this before. What is Yud Mem? I see Yesh Omrim, but he says Yud Mem.
Where are you? Probably Yesh Mefarshim. Yesh Mefarshim, probably.
Oh, Yesh Mefarshim. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the guy's walking down the road with a magla and a tovila with, implements for harvesting date trees. V'amar, and he says, Eza igdere ledikla de palnaya. I'm going to go and cut down and harvest the dates from the tree of Ruvain. Dezavni mihilei, because he sold it to me. Says the Gemara, says Rav Yehuda, mehemin. The person is believed. Why? Because lo chatzif inish de gazer dikla de lavdi day. That's like, no one would ever walk brazenly, right? Lo chatzif means you don't have the brazenness to walk into somebody else's field and start cutting things down without any real proof. So the fact is that, again, as long as the guy is not there, so Ruvain's on vacation, right? Shimon's walking down the street and he goes to the town. He's like, okay, I'm coming to Ruvain's field to harvest the decal because he sold it to me, or he sold me the rights to harvest it. We don't stop Shimon because we assume no one's going to come and do that without real permission. Now, of course, if Ruvain was in town and Ruvain said, get off my fields, we would kick him off the field, right? Because Ruvain's the owner of the field and prove that you're allowed to be here. But since no one's there, basically, we assume that Shimon is doing this appropriately. So therefore, if a person comes and says, I was hired to be a sharecropper and I'm working the field, we generally believe them, right? So therefore.
But doesn't Ruben know who he hired?
Yeah, but Reuven's not there.
Oh,
right?
but we're saying the case that this Shimon, the Rav Zvid says, Shimon could have said that this person Ruven hired me, right?
Let me
Ruven
read
is the one who shows up in the field and says, what are you doing on my field?
So, but let me just read the words. Hachanami here too says Rav Zvid, right? I'm sorry, says Rav Zvid. Lo chatzif inish the meichal perot delav delay. A person is not mechutzaf enough to eat perot that are not his. So remember, the case here is that Ruvain left, right? Shimon lived on this field for 5 years. Every year he's harvesting beautiful dates, keeps half, maybe gives half to Reuven. I'm not sure what he does with all of them. Anyways, he keeps some of them. At the end of those 5 years, Reuven shows up and says, what are you doing on my field? Right? So we said the first halacha is that if he says, what do you mean? I bought this field from you, right? And I have a chazakah, he would be trusted, but he had to bring proof that it's a chazakah. But what Rav Zvid said is, if he said, I didn't buy the field from you, but you let me, before you left, you said, I'm going away for a few years. During that time, you can go down and you can work the field and keep whatever you earn from the field. Then he would be believed. Now, of course, going forward, to be clear, Reuven could kick him off the field, right? This is only retroactive. This is saying, I don't have to pay you for the food that I admit I took for the last couple of years because I'm believed that you hired me. Now, I have no contract, right? But there's a chazakah that a person who's there is not mechutzaf to do it without permission from the other person. Again, going forward, Reuven is actively saying, get off my field. And when Reuven says,
wait a second, there's a premise here, that he's believed, but now Reuven says, I didn't hire you.
Right.
I mean, Reuven knows who he hired.
So again, there's no contracts. That's the problem. What Rav Zvid is saying is that until someone makes a macha'ah, until Reuven says, I didn't hire you, or this is not your field, you're not able to go back. Basically, we don't know, right? There's some doubt in our mind, not some, there's a lot of doubt in our mind that in fact, Shimon was allowed to do this. And since Shimon was allowed to did it with permission, we assume that Shimon can keep the fruit. Now, Reuven now is basically saying, get off my field. So he's changing the facts going forward. So what we're assuming is that in the past 5 years, Shimon had permission to do this. Reuven shows up now and says, you have no permission. So he takes away his permission, right? Basically, we assume that up till then, Shimon was doing it with permission, and Shimon does not have to pay back the fruit because a person wouldn't be mechutzaf to do that. Says the Gemara, Ihachi Aranami. So I don't get it. If a person won't go into someone else's field and you're letting him keep the fruit, let him stay on the land, right? Let him say, how would someone have a chutzpah to go on somebody else's land unless they had permission? Says the Gemara, no, it's a whole different thing. And this is really the crux of it. Ara amrina le'ach b'shtarcha. With land, you have a responsibility to show a star. And if you can't show a star, it weakens your claim. So the fact that you have no proof, Shimon, of anything, you don't have a claim to the land. Says Gemara, so what about the fruit? So show me a star that I hired you to work the fruit. Yachi peranami, answers the Gemara, the important distinction. Shtara leperi lo avdi inchi. It's not common practice to write a star when you have an agreement about peri. I guess it wasn't so valuable, right? It was a lot of money to write a star and to get a sofer. So they didn't write shtarot for peri. And so therefore, again, it all depends on what's the norm. What is expected for a person to have? Is my claim legitimate? Is my claim believable? Here, we assume that a person will not just walk into somebody else's house and start cutting down their grapevines, harvesting their field unless they had permission. That's a super bold thing. It makes you look like a horrible person. We assume people won't do it. But if it's talking about owning the land, you have a weakened claim because you really should have a star. And the fact that you don't have a star weakens your claim. Now, if you have 3 years of chazakah, then that replaces a star. But here he didn't have proof of 3 years of chazakah. And so therefore the land goes back. He's got to give back the land, but he's allowed to keep the fruit that he had up till now. That's how he passed it.
But it seems that he's chatzuf to say to Reuven in front of him, you hired me. And Reuven says, no, I didn't hire you. So then Reuven, he shouldn't be entitled to keep the payroll. If there's no Reuven's not there, okay. But
no, but we assume that Reuven's wrong, that he in fact did hire him. And that now Reuven is basically taking back the deal, that there was
so
a
we're
deal.
saying Reuven is lying. He says, no, I didn't hire you.
Yeah, that's where we're going. Or we don't actually know, but that's how we have to assume. I'm going to read a few more lines, even though I'm not going to finish it, because it's if I finish the next case, it would be till the 2 dots at the end of Lamadal, and I want to leave you something to learn tomorrow. But let's read a few lines. Maybe he'll repeat it tomorrow. Hahu Amar lechavri. A person came to somebody else. The regular case we've had many, many times, right? A person, Reuven, showed up from his long vacation, and he said to Shimon, "My boy Bahayara, what are you doing in my land?" So Amarle, so Shimon said to Reuven, dude, you sold it to me. Minach zavnit, I bought it from you, v'achalti shnei chazakah. And I've been here long enough for a chazakah. I don't have a shtar, I can't find my shtar, but I've lived here 3 years. And remember we had how chazakah works, 3 years, and Reuven came back every year, and Reuven never said anything, right? So I had a chazakah. Now Reuven says to Shimon, prove to me that you've been here for 3 years. I don't know, I never saw you before in my life. So Aiti chad sada da'ach shnei. So what Shimon goes and he brings one witness that says that he's been there for 3 years. Now, one witness is not exactly enough, but one witness is something, right? So remember, usually with one witness, you require somebody else to make a shvua, okay? So the question now is this one witness that Shimon has, that he has a chazakah, enough to turn it around to Ruvain and say, Ruvain, if you want to keep your field, swear that you never sold it to Shimon. Is that adequate or not, right? So Savur Rabbanan Kamei Abaya Lememar Hainu Naska Rabbi Abba. The Rabbanan sitting in front of Abaya heard this case, and they thought this seems very similar to the case of Naska of Rabbi Abba. Naska of Rabbi Abba is the case of Naska literally means like a piece of metal, like an ingot of metal of Rabbi Abba. And I think I'm going to stop here, but the point is we're about to take a case that a person had a dispute over a piece of silver, right? Pisa Nazca usually means silver, but an ingot of metal. And we're going to see tomorrow in that case, again, I don't want to give the whole thing away because it's the whole daf. See in that case that it's a similar situation where basically a person is making a claim against somebody else. In theory, you would have to make a shvua, but you're unable to make the shvua because you don't have all the facts on your side. And that, as we'll see tomorrow, hopefully, will basically reflect back on this case where, again, you have a claim of one person that he owns a field with a chazaka that he used to own it. You have a claim of another person that he sold it to you and that he's been there for 3 years, right? And the question really is, when you have one witness, how does one witness affect that? Does one witness strengthen the hand of the person who claims he's there now? Does it not strengthen the hand because it's only one? And we'll see tomorrow how we utilize this one witness in this case. So I'm going to stop there again, just because I don't want to finish tomorrow's daf. And so tomorrow I'll ask him maybe to pick it up from a who, because I think it'll be helpful to do the whole case again. Okay, everyone. Well, exciting stuff. There's a lot of Rashbams if you want to read on your own. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll meet. You'll meet tomorrow morning. Okay. Shavua tov.